welcome to my channel where I talk about movies. Welcome back, really, to my channel because I don't think I've filmed a video in about 7-8 weeks. And for those who follow my channel for a time, know that I am suffering from a couple of illnesses, and the result of which is sometimes extreme fatigue. But all that is caused by the chemicals, many chemicals surging through my body rather than the illnesses themselves. But I have been feeling really well the last few days, and I have to take advantage of that and film another video, and hopefully a couple more coming down the line as well. And the movie I want to discuss today is from 1978, and this is Days of Heaven, and it is directed by Terence, Malick, and it stars Richard Gere, Brooke Adams, Manz and Sam Shepard. And this is a Criterion 4K release. Looks absolutely fantastic. Now, when I first saw Days of Heaven in 1978 on a big screen, I did not see it, I don't believe, in 70 millimeter, and there were 70 millimeter prints of this available in those theaters that could show them. But nevertheless, this was one of the most memorable movie-going experiences of my life. I thought in 1978 when I first saw this that it was the most beautiful film I'd ever seen. And when it's kind of film when you walk back out into the grimy byways of suburbia, it's hard to adjust. It's a very immersive film, and with images that will stick with you the rest of your life. And it's a very simple story. It's a story set in the 19-teens. We see Woodrow Wilson as president from 1912 to 1920. And at the end of the film, we see vestiges of the First World War, which we entered, I think, in 1918. And the story is very simple. It's really a kind of plot you could find in silent films. And it opens with a scene in a factory, industrial factory with a fire burning, blast furnace. Richard Gere is stoking this fire, gets into an argument with his foreman, and he believes he has killed his foreman, so he is on the run. And the next time we see him, he is on top of a boxcar, a train that is heading into what is supposed to be the Texas Panhandle, as itinerant workers that are going to reap the harvest of the amber fields of grain, of wheat. And accompanying him is his girlfriend, who he passes off as his sister, and he's very careless with this ruse. And not only his sister, but his teenage, his actual, in the film, sister, and she is played by Linda Mance, and his girlfriend played by Brooke Adams. And we see a very authentic rendering of this harvest with old machinery and horses, and they actually filmed in Alberta, Canada, and they actually did harvest the wheat, and we can see all the labor that was involved, the intense labor that was involved in this harvest, and this wheat field is owned by this very solitary farmer who lives in this very odd house up on the hill, and it's really the only, outside of the silos and the workers, the workers' bunkhouses, it's the only vestige of life in this on this farm, and it's occupied. And this was actually built as a farmhouse, inside and out, by the production designer Jack Fisk, and the. So this is a solitary, and we're led to believe, sickly farmer who has no discernible family. He is the overseer of the farm, kind of acts paternalistically with him. He looks out for him, and as the harvest continues, Brooke Adams catches his eye, and she's very lovely in this film. And Richard Gere, who's privy to some inside information, he hatches a plan that will eventually lead to fleeting days of heaven. So this is sort of like a silent film story, but it's also like a silent film itself because there's very little dialogue. And it's images, fleeting images. There's a lot of movement in this film. And we go from image to image to image, all of them conceived, obviously great artistry. But in the supplements on this Criterion release, we get an interview with Richard Gere, and Gere says the original script was much more robust. There were long scenes of dialogue. There was melodramatic moments. There still are. There still is dialogue in this film. It too is fleeting, and there are melodramatic moments, to be sure. We have to keep up with the film. We have to fill in the gaps, so to speak. And so when Gere first saw this film, he was really kind of let down by it because he thought, what happened to all the work we did? There's so little dialogue. He came to appreciate what Malick does in this film. And what he does is he edits the film for 2 years with a very close friend of his, and paring down the dialogue, paring it down, and then getting a rhythm to the film. This is a film very much of rhythm. And they also added a voiceover. So Linda Manz is one of the great voiceovers, I believe, in cinema, and it's very similar. Now, this is Terry Malick's second film, 5 years after Badlands, which I did a video on a while back. And Sissy Spacek in that movie also provides a voiceover, but this is taken to kind of another level, and it's sort of like this ironic distancing. And what they told when they brought Linda Manson back to do this voiceover about a year later after filming was completed, they told her, watch the scene and just sort of put it in your own words. And so she has this very distinctive style. And, it does kind to lead to a kind of fairy tale element to the film, in a kind of which is more is enhanced by Ennio Morricone's very subtle, quiet score, quite beautiful. We feel like we're going back in time and we're being told a story, and we're seeing it ourselves, and then we're seeing it from the perspective of Linda Manz's character. And I think all three of these actors, all four actually, I think were making their film debuts. Certainly Linda Manz was. Richard Gere was, I'm not sure how well known he was a stage actor, as was Brooke Adams. They both came out of the New York theater. Sam Shepard was a playwright, and I think this is his first acting gig, and he finds a career in acting in Hollywood movies. If you've ever seen his plays, he is one of my favorite playwrights. So if you ever have a chance to see True West, go to see it. It's one of the great American plays. But he has this very chiseled, very, very American face, and it's exactly what Terry Malick wanted for this role. And so we have this kind of fairy tale movie that is filled with contrast. So we see fire, very important later in the film. We see fire and water. We see the contrast between rich and poor, between the city and the country, between sexual desire and sexual jealousy. There are many others, and in Pauline Kael's review of the film, she complained about that, saying that there's so many different elements here. It's hard to hang your hat, your intellectual hat, on any one aspect of the film. And and the other objection. I mean, the reviews were mixed. Everybody loved the visual beauty of the film, but some thought it went too far, that it was sort of like a coffee table book film slash film. Excuse me. And that Malick himself is more interested in the visual look of his films than he is in people. But I don't see that. I think Malick is he's a visionary filmmaker. Some people are called that really aren't, but Malick is one that is truly visionary. It's useful perhaps to compare him with Michael Cimino, who another, at least at that time of his career, was considered a visionary in Heaven's Gate. More was more is more with Michael Cimino, but with Terence Malick, less is more. And it does lead to what you could call a contemplative style. This is a movie to contemplate, to experience, and then to contemplate. Like I said earlier, there are images here you're never going to forget. And, you know, Malick was trained, educated in philosophy, wrote a book on Heidegger. I'm not proficient in philosophy. I like to read about philosophers. I like their philosophy explained to me, but certainly Malick, and there's also biblical concerns. This is a story that at one point at least we referenced specifically to a biblical story. So these metaphysical concerns in Malick's films are grounded in history, at least his first 4 films. Badlands set in the 1950s, this is 19 teens, Second World War for the Thin Red Line, New World was the founding of Jamestown Colony, the Pocahontas story, which was actually in development before Days of Heaven. And so the reviews were mixed, but the head of the studios was made by Paramount Studios. He saw the film and he thought that Malick was a genuine poet, and he told him, I don't care if your films make money or not, I'm going to finance them. And unfortunately, he died shortly after that, and I believe in an airplane crash. So now there was 5 years between Badlands and Days of Heaven, and there was at least 20 years, I forget the exact amount, between Days of Heaven and the Thin Red Line. And so he emerges back with 20 years later, and he was, what was known was he was, for at least a good part of that time, living in Paris with his cinematographer on this film, who I haven't mentioned yet, Nestor Almendros, who won an Oscar. Nestor Almendros won an Oscar for this. He worked on about 2/3 of the film, but he had a pre-existing obligation to film Truffaut's next film, so they knew he was going to leave, so they got Haskell Wexler in to finish the film. And when Wexler saw what the work that Almendros was doing, low light or no light at all, interiors and exteriors, and he was overwhelmed by it. And even Almendros says in his autobiography, even he can't tell what shots were his and what was Wexler's. So Malick is living in Almendros's home in a third floor apartments, and by all accounts, reading, studying, preparing film scripts. So he comes back with a kind of surprising film and a literary adaptation this time of The Thin Red Line by James Jones. That was written in the early 1960s. I read it in the 1960s. It's considered today to be Jones's, who was a big best-selling novelist at the time, it's considered today to be his best novel and the most authentic depiction of war that was ever written. It's based on the invasion of Guadalcanal, and Jones was actually in the invasion of Guadalcanal. He's more well-known for From Here to Eternity, which was made into an Academy Award-winning film back in the 1950s. And then he followed that with The New World. And then he suddenly became a prolific filmmaker. I always thought that these first four films, because they are grounded in history and a kind of American mythology, American violence, are his most interesting films. Whereas when the metaphysical becomes the subject in The Tree of Life and subsequently, and I've not seen all of those films. I've not seen Hidden Life, which was kind of his return to a more traditional kind of storytelling. And he's evidently preparing some huge, massive epic that he's still in the process of editing. And the Criterion comes with this really nice booklet. I just miss these booklets. I hate the fold out. Well, I don't hate them, but I much prefer these to the fold outs. And it's loaded with great pictures. And here you see the workers coming to the wheat fields on top of trains, and we get Richard Gere and then the Manz together here. Just a lot of great photographs, and also a terrific essay by Adrian Martin, and here's the silos. I mean, they actually filmed this on an actual farm, and they bought a certain amount of land to film on. Here's Sam Shepard in his debut film, the very lovely Brooke Adams. And let's see if we got some other good shots here I can show you. There's also a excerpt from Nestor Almendros' autobiography that's also very interesting. Here's the Lovebirds, Brooke Adams and Sam Shepard. And finally a shot of Richard Gere, who is very good in this film. Sam Shepard really steals the film though. He is really memorable, and going down the road feeling bad. Excuse me. So Days of Heaven, this is a movie I highly recommend. I guarantee you'll remember this film for the rest of your life. Okay, so thanks a lot for listening. I always appreciate it. I will see you soon.